either intentionally or unintentionally created. I believe intentionally, but let's take it as unintentionally created, eventually proved that it cannot be supported by anything lesser than authoritarian nationalism. That's the point. When you have something which is so robust as the present day hyper-capitalism, it needs to be supported by something which will be as robust as it is, and that's authoritarian nationalism. I think that's a structural necessity. Donald Trump is a structural necessity. We can talk about the group of people behind him, whether they belong to this lobby or that lobby, whether they are gaining their influence and wealth over IT or AI or this kind of or that kind of wealth creation. But the point is that eventually this kind of hyper exploitation that they have introduced into not only American society, but into most of societies in the world, requires a kind of mechanism that is going to adapt the population to such a system, to make population positively responsive, so to speak, to such a system. Consumerism is not enough. You can sell things to the people. They can enjoy spending their money on this and that and so on. But nationalism is something which puts them into a single unit, which promotes common interest. Let's put it this way. Consumerism creates separate individual interests, or separate individual interests are actually something which results in consumerism. But if you want to create any kind of illusion of common interest, you need nationalism. And in order to create any kind of collective loyalty to the state, to the system, to the ruling elite, you need nationalism. And nationalism plays the role in classical capitalism, and now we have authoritarian nationalism that plays that role in hypercapitalism.
Yeah. Nationalism and capitalism and authoritarianism and hypercapitalism, I mean, they're part of the same story. Ultimately, it's just you escalate one and the other one matches, which also really rings true when I think about the idea, certainly in Western nations, of the American dream, the Canadian dream, the Australian dream, which is, again, a myth. You know, we know through research, and I think Michael Sandel, he put out a book about kind of the illusion of meritocracy, which is part of that same myth, right? That, you know, we're
Yes.
meant to believe that if you work hard, you know, you can make it. But then he shows to research, I think in the US, it takes 6 generations from memory. I might have to check my own quote on that. But it takes 6 generations to go from the lowest income bracket to the highest income bracket. In Australia, I think something like 3 or 4, which is part of the idea that, you know, if you work hard, if you dedicate yourself in this system, you can make it. But then there's also the reality that, you know, people objectively live higher quality lives, you know, in this system. In other words, the things that we use to measure the quality of a human life, you know, life expectancy, child mortality, you know, whatever the metrics that show us that the human animal is flourishing in a particular area, which is then why it makes it so difficult to really take capitalism and say, well, no, capitalism, you know, is exploitative. You know, we should change it. And I wonder whether I'm sure you've wrestled with that question, but how do we cross that bridge, the cognitive leap that's required to say to the people, to the masses, that, hold on, you are being exploited because you're not getting your fair share and you're not working to enjoy a good life. You're just working. You're perpetually in debt with a bank and so on. How do we bridge that gap?
Well, that's very difficult because, you know, they will immediately proclaim you a communist. And
Absolutely.
the problem is that
it's happening now. It's happening all across.
Which preach or advocate equality are immediately, instantaneously called communism. Now we have, under the authoritarian nationalism, as we have already experienced in last couple of months in the US, we already have the case that all the people who require any kind of, you know, change in the sense that, well, even if they require that the constitution of the US is to be respected, nothing else, they are treated as terrorists, or there is some invented notion of radical left. There is nothing
now
left.
the woke
There
woke
is
right.
nothing left out of left.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And these days they are inventing some radical left which does not exist in reality, but it doesn't make any problem for people around Donald Trump to claim that there is radical left, and therefore there should be a military intervention against them as domestic terrorists, as the enemy within, and so on.
Antifa,
So
which is
yes, I mean, I don't even know whether such things do exist in reality. They probably don't. They are just marginal organizations which don't really create any kind of relevant political influence. So now we live in the age of extreme authoritarianism, I would say. Because in the past, even in the 30s, during fascism and Nazism, it's not popular to compare the current systems with those ones. But I would say that the current ones are even more extreme in the sense that they do not require any kind of legitimacy for what they are claiming. They are simply claiming things, and they simply create events out of their claims which don't have to have any kind of foundation in reality. So you don't have to have any left or Antifa as a real organization in order to bring the military to the streets of the US. In the past, in the 30s, you had to legitimize every move you made. Even anti-Semitism had to be, even the Holocaust had to be legitimized, even by false reasons and false claims, but was meant to be legitimized by pseudo-scientific arguments. These days you just say, well, those people who are against me, they are terrorists. Let's bring the military to our streets and let's eliminate them. That's the world in which we live right now, and that's something which is expanding. It's not something which is temporary, I have to warn. It's not just the US. The whole world will probably be like that for the next 30 years. The US is just the most spectacular example, the most drastic example. But otherwise, that's something which awaits us in any part of the world wherever we go.